Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and also thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, for inviting me today to talk about infodemics and give you a very brief introduction, give very brief overview of what infodemics are, a word that basically the WHO coined a couple of years ago during the first SARS pandemic, and now, of course, during the COVID pandemic, is very, very, very important topic. I want to take you a little bit back a couple of months. On the evening of November 2nd, 2020, the first time that I heard about terrorist attack is unfolding in the inner city of Vienna was through a message a friend sent me via a messenger app, Telegram. That's a messenger app like WhatsApp, for example, or WeChat. And then I immediately turned to my social media channels, Twitter and so on, and I already saw hundreds of messages and people that were talking about this attack. During the course of the night, in the next hours, that all started around 9 p.m. in the evening local time, there were hundreds and hundreds of messages, tweets, Instagram, you name it, about potential hostage situations at different locations all over the city. There were reports about numerous attackers that are still at large in the city. At the end, there were hundreds of videos, of pictures shared of the potential terrorists and so on. At the end, it turned out that only 9 minutes after the first shots fired, the terrorist was taken down by local police forces and killed. So after 9 minutes, the terrorist attack was over. And still, it was unfolding on social media for hours and hours, causing a lot of uncertainty, causing a lot of confusion, and making the tactical response of the police forces very, very hard. Because every misinformation, every speculation of a hostage situation, every picture that might show a terrorist, they had to take it into account, they had to screen and look at. So it was a very, very confusing situation. And in such situations, people do sometimes very, very dangerous things, like approximately 4 years ago, a similar case in Munich. Already after the attacker was killed by the police for hours, there were people jumping through closed windows in restaurants in Munich because they heard suspicious noises and thought there might be still terrorists, because on social media there was speculation about terrorists still at large in the city and still attacking the people. So this is what we talk about when we talk about infodemics. In this case, it's more epidemic infodemic, so very local one. But nevertheless, it is an infodemic, and the WHO puts it quite well when it says it's an overwhelming overabundance of information, both true information and false information. But it's very hard in this information overload for the people to tell the good news from the bad news, and to see what is the case, what is going on. Daniel Kahneman, I think you all know him, he differentiates our thinking in two systems. On the one side, we have the fast system. This is the system that is more unconsciously taking place, like when we drive our car, or in my case, my motorbike, and we don't have to think so much about it. And on the other hand side, there is the slow system, the system that processes things, that when we get more details, more information, we think about things and we try to figure out what this is. And for example, if you drive a car and I sit next to you and all of a sudden I tell you, hey, what is 300,046 multiplied with 472? Then all of a sudden, both things get difficult for you, both driving and calculating, because your brain is a little bit jammed and a little bit overwhelmed, and you need to focus on these detailed figures that I gave you. So this is the problem when we talk about information overload during an infodemic. And how is this information overload created? It's not only by the sheer volume of information. This is already a problem. But it's also by mis- and disinformation that gets spread. In case of, for example, the terrorist attack, so many hostage situations that allegedly were taking place, none of them were true. But you need to figure out, am I in danger? Are my loved ones in danger? And you're stuck in that information overload and try to make the right decision, and it gets more and more difficult. Also, conflicting information. I think we all know this during an emergency when a lot of authorities are involved and a lot of authorities are communicating, there is conflicting information, and this is a problem where people that people have in this case. So information overload is a complex thing, and it creates the TMI effect. And believe it or not, in this case, it doesn't mean 3 Mile Island. It is a different effect. If we look at the relation between uncertainty and information, the volume of information, amount of information, and the grade of detail, then it is clear that on the beginning, when there is not much information and the people want to find out what is going on, this is a danger zone for fake news. Because if we do not provide them with information during an emergency, they turn to other sources and they might take advantage of that. So we all know we need to communicate fast and thoroughly, and I will not repeat all these principles of good risk communication, because I think there were talks before and you all heard that already. But this is something that we need to look at. And so unfortunately, this is not a linear development. You could think, okay, the more information I give the people, the less they are uncertain about what's going on. That's not true. In fact, it's a bell curve. It's an inverted bell curve. And that is the big problem. Because there is an ideal point where we give them enough information with enough detail so they can make good choices and good decisions, and where they can switch from, or where the slow system is able to compute all this information. But when we give them in too much information or too much detail, then all of a sudden the uncertainty rises again, because they cannot compute it. They cannot find out what is right and what is wrong. So we need to be careful not to overwhelm the people with too much detail, with too much conflicting information, or with just the sheer volume of information. Okay, and now we are, of course, in a situation with COVID-19 that's a completely different ballgame. I will not repeat everything. We all are in this together for a year now. We know what COVID-19 is, the dangers, the discussions, and so on. But what we need to be aware of, look at these figures here. And I took deliberately a week from June 2020, because all my data is from mid last year, because there's already some research out there. It's not too much, but there's some research out there. Look at this. In 1 week, 26 million mentions of COVID on social media. In 1 week, 26 million, and 2.7 million on, sorry, that should read traditional media, of course, traditional news media. And this morning I Googled COVID, and I got more than 6 billion hits. 6 billion hits on COVID. Just as a comparison, if you Google Islam, it's about 1 billion hits. And also, if you Google the moon, who is around a little bit longer than COVID and the SARS-CoV-2 virus, then it's a third of what we have in hits of for COVID. And how does that happen? How is this working? And look at this graph. It only goes to 2018 because that's the best data I got. Just kind of extend these lines to the sky, and then you have the situation today. We have today more than 5 billion people in the world that are somehow engaged on social media. That's a penetration of way over half of the world's population that are active on social media. Now think about, are you active on social media, yes or not? If not, imagine how many people there are and how they use it. And if you say yes, but we had this problem also during the Fukushima Daiichi accident, where there were a lot of rumors, a lot of speculation on social media. True, absolutely true. But look at this. This was 2011. Since then, the use of social media more than quadrupled. And there are so many people out there. Also, look at this. WhatsApp is probably now here somewhere. WhatsApp, kind of messenger app that I just mentioned, like Telegram or WeChat. These are the black boxes. We don't even know what the people talk about there because we cannot search these channels. There is a lot of place for rumor. And also look at this, TikTok here, which is a video app for the youngsters, is way bigger than Twitter now. So in the age group between 14 and 24, way more people are on TikTok than are on Twitter. So think about your authorities and your organization. You have a Twitter account, maybe you have a Facebook account, but you need to be very careful not to leave the youngsters behind because they are not on Facebook anymore and they're for sure not on Twitter. Also look at this. We can see here the blue line is the relative search volume on Google about COVID. And the red lines are actual reported cases of COVID. Look at this. The search volume is actually in most countries, a predictor for coming cases that are reported. How can that be? It's because, well, you have one case in your vicinity, in your family, among your friends, and then you start to Google. And if you have 5 friends start to Google. So with every reported case, you have 5 people that start searching on the internet. So we can use this data also. We can use this as a predictor to see how will a pandemic really develop. Plus, if we do not manage to close that gap between when the people look for it, approximately 11 days before the peak of the reported cases, and when it really happens, then they will look for different sources of information, and that will probably not the best ones. That will probably also, it's also a delta where the fake news will be able to come in. And when we talk about mis and disinformation, it's not a rocket science to know that the miracle cures are probably way up, because especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when we cannot tell the people, yes, there's a cure, when there's no vaccine, and we have to tell them, you know, you can just protect yourself. Of course, people look for, hey, is there something else? Is there some cure, some ginger juice that I can drink that is antiviral, like many influencers on Instagram claimed to sell their stuff? So that is a dangerous thing. Also think about these kind of things. This is a clickbait disinformation or misinformation. It was made up. Of course, the Pope was never infected, but these guys, they deliberately put up a single web page to promote this fake news, to get traffic on their website, to gain revenues from advertising. And this is how this fake news was spread for a couple of days, that the Pope is infected with COVID. So there are more dangerous fake news, of course, but this is something that was very, very viral in the first days of the pandemic. Also think about conflicting information, something we often contribute to. You remember when the WHO, but also the German Robert Koch Institute and also the CDC say you don't have to wear any masks. It's basically almost more dangerous to wear masks. And then all of a sudden people, the same experts said, I think now it's good to wear masks. It's because in Europe, for example, we had no culture of wearing masks, contrary to Asia, for example. And also they were afraid that they would not have enough masks for the medical staff. So they just said, no, you don't need that. That backfired, because when they later said, now you should wear masks, the people had lost the trust. And also look at this. We also talk about an international pandemic. This is what makes this infodemic a pandemic one. It's all around the globe. And so we have dashboards and information from all over the world about, for example, Germany. The funny thing is, and I took this screenshot yesterday between 2049 and 2051, all these 3 figures are different. And they are different because the time when they are taken is different, and when they're reported is different, but also the way they get the information is different. Now this makes not much difference anymore now that we are 1 year in the pandemic. But at the beginning, when we were talking about way less cases, a couple of % of difference made a lot of difference for the people when it comes to trust. So they said, listen, there are three different numbers. Which number can we trust? The people don't know anything. And at the end, you might ask yourself, yeah, but that is COVID. What about nuclear emergencies? Well, the problem is that COVID and this pandemic that we see, there are a lot of similarities, actually. The risk perception factors are the same. The complexity of the national response is the same. And also the public interest is the same. So we need to look at this pandemic. And at the end, we need to ask ourselves questions. For example, the topical and methodological ones about risk communication. WHO had done a great job, put out a lot of great material and a lot of great advice. Also, I have to applaud them for being actually on all the relevant social media channels, also for the youngsters, also on TikTok, also on Instagram. Very well done. But we cannot focus anymore only on this. We also need to ask societal questions. What kind of information do we want that the people get, and how do they want to get it? What is the quality of the information? Do we have to regulate social media somehow? We need to ask these questions. And last but not least, the individual questions. We also need kind of hygienic rules, like washing the hands or sneezing in the elbow for information. We need to teach the people that they need to be hygienic when it comes to information, to look at the source, to look at the content, to do cross-checks, to do fact-checking, this kind of hygienic actions that can preserve them for getting infected by fake news. And that's it from my point here from Vienna, and I give back to the chairs, and thank you very much for having me.